Hello writers, come write with me. My name is Mykela Greenwood. I create worlds for mind adventures. Welcome to my YouTube channel, Write with Mykela. Don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the bell so you can go on this journey with me. Today is story time, or the day of our chapter exchange. I'm hoping to continue to get chapters from you. Don't leave us hanging. If you've already sent, say, chapters 1 through 10, I am releasing 2 videos on some Tuesdays to read your writing from your writing prompts, and 2 videos on some Fridays to read your chapters for those of you where I have permission to read them on the channel. So basically, your work will be extra videos, but everything else will be the same for my viewers. If you're writing with me and you wish to exchange chapters, then I need written permission to read your chapter on the channel, as I have discussed before. Writers may send their chapters in PDF or Word document format to WritewithMykela@gmail.com. That will be posted at the end of the video. Write is spelled W-R-I-T-E, like the activity of writing, not your right hand. And Mykela is spelled M-Y-K-E-L-A. Please do not send Google Docs. I'm not making any promises to read every chapter sent to me on the channel, but I intend to read all the chapters sent. All chapters read on Fridays, whether they are mine or another writer's work, are copyright protected material, and no one may use any part in writing their own stories. I want to remind everyone that this story is at least PG-13, meaning if you are under 13 years of age, you need parental guidance. This story is in its rough draft stage, as we've already heard some mistakes, and I've talked about filling in some of the scenes. The title of the story is City of the Ancients, and today we are reading chapter 16. One viewer wanted to know if they could have something to read along with as I read. So if that is something you would like, then email me and ask for whichever chapter it is that you are wanting. I will create a PDF of the chapter. The PDF, once created, won't receive any edits, and it may or may not match exactly what I read on the channel, but that's what I can offer. Let's start. Chapter 16, Castle Southpolk. They rode in the wagon going east for 2 days and 2.5 days. Then they turned the wagon north, since the river flowed south, and they wanted to ride the river into the castle as they had before. Before Kirsha got out the raft, she used Xantrix on Mr. Valens once again, and she asked his mind if it had any questions. She didn't find any, so she got out the raft, enlarged it, magically lifted the horse and cart on it, and magically placed it in the river. The horse wasn't too keen on this exercise, so Kirian got off the wagon quickly and was near the horse's head to calm him. After floating down the river for several minutes, Mr. Valen asked, "Why are we using the river to go south? The ocean is south." He looked up all around as they floated through an open gate and into the castle. He looked amazed and wide-eyed at all the docks off the river, and then when they took the lesser vein of the river to the courtyard, the architecture completely astounded him. Kilty could barely contain her excitement because she really wanted her own orb, but she didn't say a word. However, Kirian and Kirsha could tell she was excited. When they arrived at the ramp, Kirian tied off the cart, but Kirsha magically lifted the horse and cart up the ramp and set them in the courtyard. Things seemed set up similarly, very similarly, to the previous castle. So Kirian took the horse to the stable, while Kirsha went to get grass for the horse. She thought to Kilty to let her know if Mr. Valens did anything strange. Afterwards, they carried many of their things upstairs into the vestibule of the castle. Mr. Valens immediately noticed the heraldry on the castle floor, and he walked around it and studied it very intensely. It seems like I should know what this means, but I can't recall. Kirsche shrugged her shoulders to herself. But then she got an idea. She handed him a book on heraldry and told him the book might contain his answers. Kieran added that he might want to find a room and come back. But Mr. Vaughn said he was fine, and he sat down to read. Once Kilty saw that the book and the symbols on the floor occupied Mr. Vaughns, she knew Kieran and Kirsche would allow her to explore. After they found rooms to sleep in, Kieran pulled them into a study room. Now, Kilty, before you go exploring, I want Kirsche to tell her story once again of finding her orb. The secret door I found to mine wasn't exactly the same, but everything else was. Then he looked at Kirsche. She sighed. So much has happened since then. It almost seems a lifetime. She sat and thought a few minutes, and then she started her story back at the map room. As she told the story, she wondered about the house whose bottom was convex instead of concave. If Kilty's orb was here, then Kirsche would assume the concave meant or symbolized the orb key, although her orb key was in the tower. But what exactly did the convex house symbolize? She didn't know, and she continued her telling without pausing too long. After Kirsche finished telling everything, Kilty wanted to go, but Kieran held up a finger, and he tried to think with her. He knew that Kirsche had been successful because of the thoughts he and Kirsche had shared, but he wanted to be successful too. Kilty waited patiently. Then she received, "If you need help for whatever reason, maybe help to open a door you find, then think to us. We're assuming the castle is empty except for us, but we don't know." Kilty looked at Kieran, then she looked at Kirsche. She thought to Kirsche, "Think to me." Kirsche thought, "What? You want a math problem?" Kilty thought, "No, I wanted to feel the difference. Are you both getting my thoughts? If not, how do I know which one of you is getting my thoughts?" Kirsche looked at Kieran and motioned to Kilty. "She's turning out to be a very good ancient with all these questions." Kieran chuckled and said, "I got your thoughts too. I don't know how you know which one. One or both of us will respond," stated Kirsche. Kilty was satisfied, and she left the room to explore. Both Kieran and Kirsche noticed her limping, but knew she would enjoy exploring. Kilty didn't explore more than an hour, and then she went back to her room. She changed her bandage and herbs. She was in quite a lot of pain lately, and she didn't want Kieran or Kirsche to know. As they rode in the wagon each day, she knew her legs stiffened up, so she tried to walk around the camp when they stopped. Now she had a whole castle to explore, but she didn't want to go too far in the wrong direction. She was a little bit afraid of getting lost. Kilty got a book and sat on the bed with her legs stretched out, and she waited for the herbs to soak in. She started reading. Kilty had just started practicing saying a spell when suddenly she heard, "I can help you." Kilty laid the book down on her lap and looked around the room. At first she didn't see anything, but she didn't feel like it was the telepathy she used with Kieran and Kirsche. "Who's there?" she asked as her voice shook a bit. Then Kilty saw what she would describe as a ghost. "Don't be afraid," said the ghost. "I won't hurt you." Kilty stared wide-eyed at the ghost. "Spirits can hurt you, but probably not as you think about them hurting you. But I am here for a reason. I didn't know that reason until I saw you." Kilty just stared. She didn't know what to say. "I helped make your orb. I believe your orb is stronger than you, but I see you need it to go to the ultrarium. They can help you there. I wanted to go there very badly, but as you see, I didn't make it." Kilty still wasn't sure what to say. But the spirit told her about making the orb and how the orb would call the user. The spirit also said a person needed to be strong enough to hold the orb, to feel the orb calling. When Kilty asked how she would be able to hold it, the spirit explained the staff and the purpose of the staff. The spirit asked Kilty if she wanted to go or if she wanted to rest more. Before Kilty answered, she asked how spirits could hurt someone. The spirit explained about entering the mind and directing the mind to add pain to different parts of the body. Kilty cringed and her face creased with the pain she imagined. "I'm not an angry spirit," reassured the spirit. So Kilty agreed to go along with her. They went down many corridors and down some stairs to a lab. Kilty saw a place where several lab coats hung. "I believe the door you seek is behind those white coats," said the spirit. Kilty looked over to the spirit and asked, "Aren't you coming with me?" "No, I can't lead you all the way. The rest is up to you," said the spirit. "I'm going back to my room, and I'll see you when you return." "Oh, that was your room?" asked Kilty. "I didn't know. I'm sorry." The spirit held up her hands in front of herself. "It was my room when I was alive. You're welcome to use it, or even call it your own. Once you find your orb, I may even be able to leave here and go to the realm beyond. Don't worry so." Kilty walked towards the coat, and she pushed them to the side. She saw a door, and then she looked over her shoulder at the spirit. The spirit motioned her on. Kilty opened the door. She glanced once more at the spirit before she walked inside. Inside, she expected stairs, but she saw a corridor. There were lights sparsely placed along the walls. The lights looked like torches, but Kilty knew they were magic. Finally, she came to some stairs down. She looked around for the stairs going up before she continued, but she didn't see them. She went down and down. She felt soon she would be in the river, but she never saw any water. Then she finally came to a landing. She saw a different set of stairs going up and some going down. She looked at the set of stairs going up, and she desperately wanted to go up because she just knew her orb was there. But her leg hurt, and she was afraid she needed the staff first. She didn't want to go up and not be able to get the orb and then have to go down and then up again. She said up the stairs, "Don't worry, orb. I'm coming for you. I have to get the staff first." Then she thought about Kirsha's story. Kirsha used the staff to stick in the floor and to turn to make the pedestal appear. So Kilty knew she needed the staff for more reason than being able to hold the orb. After Kilty went down a little way, her leg was hurting her more than she could bear. So she sat on the stairs and waited to see if the herbs would help her a little more. Kirian and Kirsha had also explored, and they met back up in the reading room. They didn't know Kilty had gone to a resting room and then gone back out to explore with the spirit. But when they met, they both said, "Kilty isn't thinking with me." They both stopped and then said, "Mr. Vollins is studying symbols in the vestibule." Kirsha sighed and sat in a chair. Kirian eased to a sit in another chair. What if, well, I don't know how all this works, but what if you can't be disturbed while going down and then up to the tower? Kirsha pulled out her staff and poured the orblet in her hand. "We could ask." Kirsha glanced at Kirian. "I wanted to check on the terrarium anyway. I did tell you about the dissenters." "Yes, that just seems so horrible. You kill your enemy and then they use your power, your magic to come back and fight you again? Kirian shook his head. That's just wrong. Once you kill your enemy, they should be dead and gone. Not something you have to worry about the rest of your life. Did I tell you the hypothesis that I'm working on? Asked Kirsha. Yes, but my mind isn't processing the possibility, replied Kirian. Kirsha told him about getting more grass and trying to pull the water out. She told him it became dry and brittle. Then she told him about the different fruits she tried and how they looked similar to the dried fruits they had been eating on their trip. Kirian then burst out about how they hadn't really planned the trip. Yes, when they had gone to the cave, they had found rabbits and fish and frogs, but hunting wasn't something they normally did, especially not in this area of the land. Kirsha just stared at Kirian as she thought about his words. I'm sorry, stated Kirian. I don't blame you. I just think we need to plan better next time. Not that I'm wishing for next time. I understand, replied Kirsha. We've been very fortunate so far. Kirsha paused. While we're here, I want us, you and I, to read what we can on fighting dissenters. Maybe there are books in the rooms with the weapons. I didn't take spears last time, but I could shrink them and they wouldn't take up much space. Kirian stared at Kirsha as it sank into his being that they would be fighting the dissenters, and that scared him to the core. He then remembered that Kirsha kept saying 15 to 20 dissenters. Finally, he found his voice. That night, you disappeared. That night, you said you would be back, and suddenly you were gone. I felt something, stated Kirsha. I think someone wanted to talk to me, but I went away so Mr. Vollins wouldn't see me using the orb. I went to the raft, and then I thought we would need it. Can you go get spears? Can you get books? Asked Kirian. You can shrink stuff. Kirsha looked at Kirian and processed what he was saying. Then she thought of where she wanted to go. She wanted to go back to their village and use Xantrix on Mr. Leister, but that was a bit dangerous. More danger than they needed to experience right now. Then Kirsha said, Food? Would you want more food, too? Kirian thought a moment. Shook his head, no. No, because I just realized how much we brought from the castle, and there is food here as well. But I was thinking about if we hadn't found the castles and the stores. So, it's not that you really want something from the castle. It's that you want to know what I can do, asked Kirsha. Yes, stated Kirian firmly. What if the dissenters can feel me when I ride the wind, asked Kirsha. Then only go back the way we came, stated Kirian. We have telepathy. Go to the castle, Castle Westpolk. Think to me from there, and then return. Kirsha decided to try. Kirian saw her disappear from his sight. A few minutes later, Mr. Vollins was calling out for them. Kirian showed him to a room to rest and showed him where the reading room was. He didn't point out their rooms they had chosen for themselves to rest in. After he took care of Mr. Vollins, he peeked in Kilty's room. He noticed the herbs and bandages out and felt Kilty had come back to change her bandage and then continued exploring. He remembered that he didn't want to stop exploring until he had his orb, even though in some ways he didn't want it. He hoped Kilty would be okay and hoped her leg didn't hurt her much. He went back to the reading room and took out his orb to see what he could see. He couldn't find Kilty or Kirsha, but he could see Mr. Vollins and their horse. He could see outside the castle. Everything seemed quiet. If Kilty didn't need her cure, Kirian felt he could stay in one of these castles. He drifted into thought about his life in his village, and in the village they lived in. He thought about how stressful it was to live in the village, and he remembered Kirsha's comments on the village. Then he thought about the 3 dead villagers and thought how fearful the villagers must be now. Arik reached out his hand and touched the sphere. He said, "Son, do you want to talk?" Kieran looked in his orb and saw his father. "No, not really," replied Kieran. "Son, I won't push much, but I will say, if you don't work through some of this, you may continue to inhibit your magic." "I'm listening," said Kieran. "Where do you want me to start?" asked Arik. "I can start in the distant history and work toward today." Kieran nodded. "That's fine." Kieran stared inside the orb and saw the scientists sitting in the chairs around the sphere. He relaxed in the chair and decided to listen to the history. His father started back as far as the recorded history he knew. He told of how there was no technology in the beginning, or how they used telepathy, and they cared for each other. And then they began to make technological advances, and they explored space. Some of them found worlds inhabited by humans, and they shared their technology with the humans. But the humans used the technology in excess and started wars among themselves. Then the dissenters entered their lives, and they decided to divide the humans even more. As the humans began fighting themselves, they gave technology to the dissenters to help them fight. None of the humans knew the dissenters weren't human, because the dissenters took over bodies of humans. Arik told how the ancients blamed themselves, so they helped plant groups of humans on habitable planets, and these groups swore off technology. The ancients then gathered the dissenters and put them in a place very similar to the Ultrarium. They hoped the dissenters would live out their lives in peace and not realize they were in a sort of prison. They hoped the dissenters would think of it like a paradise. Intermixed during the time of gathering the dissenters, they had built their city in the ring of the mountains and had continued their research. After much discussion, they decided to close off their city so that no one would use their technology against anyone again. Arik paused a moment, and then he asked, "Do you want me to tell you about the first king and queen who left siblings? Or just about us? Or is that enough for now?" Kieran shook his head. "That's enough for now. I'm not sure how any of this will help me with my magic, but I'll think through things. And I need to be available to Kirsha and Kilty when they think with me." "Of course, son," stated Arik. He turned away and walked slowly down the street. A punt watched him leave, and he looked in the sphere at Kieran. Kieran looked in his orb, and he could see Kirsha going through the weapons room. He thought to her to bring a few more knives, especially if she found some longer ones. Kirsha thought in turn that she would, but they needed to be careful because they didn't want the dissenters to use the knives on them. Kieran nodded, even though Kirsha couldn't see him. Then he looked for Kilty, and he still could not find her. Kilty had managed to go all the way down to the graveyard, but she was reading headstones. She said to herself, "I wonder whose room I'm in." Then she said, "Oh no, I'm talking to myself. I must be a magic user. I am a magic user." She looked around and read several more headstones. Then Kilty decided to try to write a bubble. Water rose out of the ground under her and lifted her up. But the water bubble was round, and she slid right off the edge. It hurt when she fell, even though she hadn't been that high up. "Ow, I'm not sure I want to do that again," she said to herself. "Well, since I'm talking to myself, I might as well say, Kilty, find the staff. Your leg is hurting, and it may get worse. You don't want to be stuck down here without your herbs." So she started limping on and only glanced at the rest of the headstones. Soon she looked ahead and saw the staff. She started to run to it, but pain rippled through her whole body. She fell down to the ground and looked towards her staff. She reached out her hand to it as tears formed in her eyes from her pain. "That's my staff," she said firmly. As she pushed herself up to a stand, she slowly limped over to the staff and then leaned against it until the pain lessened. Then she tried to pull the staff out of the ground, but it didn't budge. Kilty sighed and sat down near the staff as she thought about things. She thought that maybe you didn't pull the staff out with your strength. Maybe you used your magic. Then she thought that Kirsha wouldn't tell that in the story because Kirsha used magic all the time without realizing it. So Kirsha stood up and placed her hands on the staff. She said her water spell, and a bubble of water came up out of the ground and lifted the staff. Then the water seeped back down, and Kilty had her staff, and it was 1.5 times her height, and quite a bit heavier than she expected. Kilty didn't know how to shrink the staff, so she stood there holding the staff and gazing up to the top of it. Then, to her surprise, the staff started shrinking without her saying a spell. She thought that she did have thoughts about it shrinking and wondered if sometimes the thoughts of something was enough. She remembered Kirian telling Kirsha to be careful with her thoughts. Kilty looked at the staff as it lay on her palm like a thick wooden needle. Then she lifted her gaze to the staircase that looked like a tower reaching up to the stars. And that was the first time that Kilty gazed up at the stars all around. They awed and amazed her. She headed to the stairs, and for the moment she wasn't thinking about her pain. In fact, she made it all the way to the stairs without limping once. When she got to the stairs, she looked up and felt like the stairs continued forever upward. She sighed and started up the stairs. Suddenly, the wooden needle in her hand felt warm, as she remembered her orb was upstairs. So she focused on getting her orb. She wondered what color it would be. She really liked the purple color of Kirsha's orb, and she also really liked the orange color of Kirian's orb. Kirsha walked into the reading room, and Kirian jerked awake. "Mr. Vollins isn't in the vestibule," stated Kirsha. "I showed him to a sleeping room," replied Kirian. Kirsha noticed the book laying open on his lap and knew he had read some of City of the Ancients. She was glad because he would catch certain details that she wouldn't. She wanted to ask if there was any word on Kilty, but she wasn't sure about Kirian. He didn't seem fully awake. Kirsha sat down in the chair across from him. She smiled and said, "You know, if Kilty found her orb, she is probably having Grandpa tell her 100 stories." Kirian smiled slightly. "Yes, I only heard a few lines here and there when we were in the last castle, but Kilty was enthralled." Then Kirian told Kirsha the history their father had told him. Afterwards, neither said they wanted to wait up for Kilty, but that's what they both wanted. So they turned to their books they were currently reading and read until their eyelids closed and their heads drooped to the side. Kilty finally came to the top, but the door was too heavy for her to push open. She tried, and it wouldn't budge. She even pushed her head against the door to try to raise it up. Finally she said, "I'm not a good magic user at all. I think of magic last." Suddenly she heard a noise and looked down the stairs as water came rushing up. This startled her. She took in a deep breath and held it before the water completely covered her body. The water rushed up against the door and flipped the slab back, and then the water rushed over the sides of the tower. Kilty didn't know what happened to the water, and she was scared to move in case the water rushed back down the stairs. After a few minutes, she slowly climbed a few stairs till her head was through the hole. She looked around and saw the whole floor of the tower was wet. Kilty climbed out of the hole and went to the half walls of the tower. She leaned out the opening and looked out of the tower. She went all the way around looking out. She marveled at it and how it was the same way as Kirsha had described. Kilty opened her hand and the wooden needle was still there. Whew! I don't know what I would have done if the water had washed my staff away. She looked around on the floor of the tower and looked for the hole to put the staff in, and she didn't see the hole. Maybe I have to be stronger to see it, said Kilty with disappointment coming through. Still, she wasn't ready to go back down the stairs, so she held the needle in her hand and it grew to become a staff once again. It was heavy, but she lifted it and let it thud to the ground. She did this several times in several places. Kilty let out an exasperated sigh and then lifted the staff once more. This time it slid down in an unseen hole. Kilty released the staff and backed up. I did it! She exclaimed. Oh, wait! I have to turn it! She grasped the staff with both hands and tried to turn with all her might, but to no avail. Then she tried turning the other direction, and it turned. Kilty's excitement grew. She jumped up and down a few times before her mind registered the pain in her leg. She gazed around the tower because she thought something was supposed to happen. Then slowly, something started rising up out of the floor. Kilty stared at the pestle, and it was just as Kirsha had described. Kilty's gem was red. It was such a beautiful red. She remembered a piece of embroidery that Kirsha had done with red birds all over it. The birds were so pretty. Kilty remembered that Mr. Parsons had purchased it and displayed it in the church, and she would just stare at the birds every time they were there. She knew she was supposed to listen to Mr. Parsons' message, but the birds mesmerized her. Kilty slowly lifted her hand to gently stroke the orb. Apont smiled as he watched Kilty. He wasn't going to say anything because he didn't want to interrupt the moment. As Kilty lowered her hand down to stroke the gem, she could see light streams rise up from the gem to her hand, like little bolts of red lightning. They didn't hurt her, and she just looked at the streams for a few minutes. She briefly thought that she needed to use the staff. She thought the spirit had told her she wasn't strong enough to hold it, but she was too fascinated. Kilty placed her hand over the orb and lifted it up. She gazed down into it, and she saw a man standing near the sphere. "Grandpa!" she exclaimed. Apont chuckled. "Yes, it is me. I'm holding my orb. Yes, I see that. I thought I wasn't strong enough." "Well, I think you might not be strong enough for the orb to call you, but it is obviously yours. You saw the connection. The staff will help you carry it." "Yes, the spirit told me about the staff. Do you know the spirit's name? Did you see her?" "I did not see the spirit. We might can find the name, but I'm not sure." He turned to the scientist. "Did any of you see the spirit?" The scientists shook their heads no. One said that Kilty seemed to be talking to someone earlier, and Kilty seemed to suddenly know the way to the door. But no, they hadn't seen or heard a spirit. "Do they think I'm crazy?" asked Kilty. Apont chuckled again. No, dear. There is a hypothesis going around that before technology we could do lots of things, like talk to spirits and use telepathy with each other. But once technology came along, we lost those abilities. Even when the humans walked away from technology, they didn't automatically regain those abilities. Kilty thought about things for a minute. Do I need to keep my orb a secret from Mr. Vollins? Kirsha checked him out and was satisfied enough to let him in the castle, replied Apone. Just keep it hidden until you're proficient at using it. Can I take the pillow too? Asked Kilty. She rubbed her other hand across the surface of the pillow and felt its silky smoothness. Yes, you may take the pillow, replied Apone. Usually at night we lay our orbs on little pillows, but you don't want to do that yet. I don't know how long I've been gone, so I probably should return. I don't want Kirsha and Kirian to worry. Sure, replied Apone. We can talk any time. A scientist raised his hand and Apone nodded his head towards him. Kirsha was able to use her orb to use or enhance her telepathy, so Kilty, you may be able to use your orb to have a telepathic conversation with your grandfather. Kilty looked into her orb to see the scientist. Okay, I will try it. Kilty then took the staff with one hand and it started shrinking until it was about 1/3 its height. Kilty put the orb near the top of it and it shrank until it fit inside. Then the staff shrank the rest of the way down to needle size. Kilty found some string and put the needle around her neck the way she had seen Kirsha do. Then she grabbed the pillow and headed down the stairs. She didn't even try to close the door. When she had gone down quite a few stairs, she heard the door close on its own. She looked up the stairs and she was scared, but she couldn't really see where the door was anymore because of the way the stairs spiraled. When she got to the bottom of the stairs, she sat on the stairs to rest. She would go back up the other stairs in a little while. Kirsha jerked awake in the chair, and she looked across to Kirian. She realized the oil lamps had slightly brightened. She thought perhaps that was part of the magic. Kirsha closed her book and softly set it on the table, and then she headed out of the room. Before she reached the door, Kirian asked, "Where are you going?" "I felt Kilty, so I'm going to help her change her bandage," replied Kirsha. Kirian nodded and then stretched. Kirsha went out the door and automatically headed in Kilty's direction. After a few minutes, Kirian headed down to the dock to practice his magic. He remembered throwing the grape in the water for Kilty. He didn't know that spell, but he was going to get some grass and lay it on the stones to see if he could start a fire. Kirsha spotted Kilty after she turned down a couple of corridors. "Kilty, there you are!" Kilty slightly jumped. "Oh, good, you found me! I thought I was lost. I've been talking to myself." Kirsha raised her eyebrows. "And just what did you tell yourself?" "That I might have gone the wrong way. All these halls look the same, and there's so many of them." "Well, it's time to change your bandage," stated Kirsha. "I changed it earlier," replied Kilty. "I peeked in your room and saw the changed bandage, but still, that was a while ago." Suddenly, Kirsha got an idea, and it was exciting to her, but she kept her excitement to herself. They went to Kilty's room and started changing the bandage. As she was applying the herbs, Kirsha tried to magically feel the wound to see if she could feel the poison and find a way to magically pull the poison out of the wound. While Kirsha was applying the herbs, Kilty was looking around for the spirit, so she didn't notice what Kirsha was doing. Suddenly, Kilty saw the spirit, and the spirit was waving goodbye and fading from view. Kilty said, "Wait! What's your name?" Kirsha looked up at Kilty, and then she looked over her shoulder. "Shamila, or Shami for short," said the spirit. "Good luck with everything." "Will I get to see you again, or speak to you again?" asked Kilty. "I'm going to the realm beyond," stated the spirit. "I feel I can go now. I don't know if telepathy can reach between the two realms." Then the spirit faded and was gone. Kirsha looked back at Kilty. Weren't you supposed to think with Kirian or myself if you met someone here? She was nice, replied Kilty. That's not what I asked, stated Kirsha. Kilty thought a few minutes. She wasn't sure if she wanted to tell about her orb yet or not. In a lot of ways, she wanted to show and tell. But she remembered Kirsha not wanting to pry into whether or not Kirian found his orb. She thought of what she could say. Finally, she said, Shami helped make my orb. She told me about divination, which I didn't totally understand. But the team of scientists needed to know what color to make the orbs. I told her that the colors were so pretty, any color would do. So what color is yours? Asked Kirsha. I would guess blue because you work water spells. Kirian's is orange because fire is orange. Mine is red, stated Kilty without hesitation. It's the color of the bird you embroidered on the piece Mrs. Parsons has in the church. Kirsha briefly closed her eyes and put her hand to her chest. What's wrong? Asked Kilty. Then Kirsha told Kilty about the deaths in their village. Afterwards, Kilty brought out her orb and showed Kirsha. She confessed that she wasn't sure she wanted to tell Kirsha or not, but Kirsha said she had seen the pillow. Kilty rubbed her hand across the pillow. It's really soft. Kirsha rubbed it too. She confessed that she wished she had brought her pillow too, but right now she wasn't leaving the orb on the pillow. Then they looked in their orbs until they could see their parents' orbs on their pillows. Kirsha finished up changing the bandage, and then she left Kilty and went to her own sleeping room that she shared with Kirian. Kirian wasn't there, so she looked in her orb to find him. Kirian was sitting at the dock and warming his hands with a very small fire, and the fire was going out, but Kirian seemed happy. So Kirsha crawled in the bed and went to sleep. Okay, writers, that's the end of chapter 16. Now, all three friends have their orb keys, which will help them to enter the city. But as we have read so far, they may not want to just let themselves in the city. I hope you have enjoyed this chapter and enjoyed getting to see Kilty shine a little. Also, we know that Kirian can now use his magic. In this chapter, Kirian thought or said that he wouldn't mind just living in one of these castles. So leave a comment below if you agree with him. Would you have your characters just stay in the castle? Would you want to stay but more strongly want to get Kilty her cure? Maybe as a writer you decide that Kirsha can magically feel the poison and remove it. And then you wouldn't need to get Kilty's cure. How would you proceed if this was your story to write? Now notice all of the questions I just asked. If you get stuck in your story, then ask questions. The answers will help you continue. When I read your chapters on the channel, I will probably ask questions. Those questions are not meant to be critical. They are a reader's curiosity, which means you may or may not answer them. And if you answer, it may not be right away. You may have more story to write first. On Tuesday, we will discuss a little more thoroughly fiction versus nonfiction, which will include opinion versus fact. One of my viewers asked me to do that. On Friday, we will read chapter 17, Another Leg of the Journey. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe and the bell so we can continue to write together. Send your chapter 16 as a PDF or Word document to WritewithMykela@gmail.com. Or if you haven't sent any chapters, then send your chapter 1. You don't have to polish it or perfect it. This is just fun stuff. Visit my website, read about the characters in Mykela, Operative, City of the Ancients. My website is www.bymykela.com. That's www.bymykela.com. Leave a comment below on how many bios you've read so far, or let me know your favorite characters so far. Thank you for joining me today. I really appreciate your participation. If you know someone who would like this video, then please share it with them. This is Mykela with Write with Mykela. Bye for now.